Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences from some of the greatest coaches in the world. I'm Michael Kurkowski, so grateful for you joining me today. And if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to support the show. All right, let's dive in. Here we go.
All right, and we are live. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Joe, what's up, man? Thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. Feels like it's been a long time coming for me on this one. I've known you for quite a few years now, with our connection from BG and Carrie, and just being able to share space with you. It's funny, I've talked to a lot of people on the podcast who I would consider like Renaissance people. Like they dabble in so many different areas and are so deep in their thought. If you're not at the top of that, you're definitely in the chief of staffs of all those. I always get so much from hearing your insights and seeing the work that you do. So I'm really just excited to hear more about your journey, all the work that you're doing with neuro and mindset and stuff. So again, just really grateful to have you come on and share some space.
Likewise. It's funny that you bring up the Renaissance. The aspect of it is Dr. Ryan said the same thing to me, who you've had on your show, I believe, right?
Oh, yeah. I love Ryan.
Mm-hmm. And so he said the same thing to me during the Mindset Summit series, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting way. I just never really thought of it.
You never did?
No.
You never thought of yourself like that?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I think it's I guess it's a characteristic of not just knowing a lot of stuff, but just being curious about how people think, about kind of the depths, like the layers, underneath it. And I have always resonated with talking to people like that, because like I can talk strength, but I like to talk about other aspects of things with stuff and go deeper. And when you talk to people who have so many curious kind of thoughts in their head, all of a sudden the conversation is just way deeper, with it. I've always thought that from, connecting with you in person, from all the different groups that we've connected with, you've always had such great insight. So that's why I always thought of you that way.
No, that was cool. And I guess the curiosity factor resonates with me a lot. And it's one of my favorite things about you. Like you just ask such great questions and you're so curious. So
yeah. So
yeah.
I know a lot of the work that you've done. You've actually connected me with quite a few people that have come on the podcast, specifically with Next Level Neuro and that side of it, which I want to dive into it with you more, because it's a fascinating topic for me, and also one that I feel still at such a beginner stage of understanding really the benefits of neuro training. So we're going to dive into that. But I really, now that I have you on the show, I really want to get more into your journey and how this all started for you. What was like going back into like understanding optimal health and like your journey into understanding that piece and the importance of it? What was your first kind of experience of getting into looking more at your own health, which eventually led you into all the work that you've done with mindset, with gut, and eventually going into neuro?
Yeah. I compound fractured my femur when I was 18. So it's really the kickoff point for me. Although from a health perspective, I had no interest in that. I went to school for business side of things, but I was in that environment getting PT. I went to the University of Wisconsin La Crosse. It's very popular for masters in kinesiology, PT, pre-chiropractic, that kind of thing. So a lot of curious students meeting a classmate with a compound fractured femur. And then they had the PT area for students to do the practice where I could go get therapy every day. Right. So that was a big exposure into what that world looked like, even though I didn't appear to have any interest in it. Right. And then as I graduated college, I got into the bar business. And after a while of a lot of people saying things to me about my physical appearance and questioning what things that I did or didn't do. And I was like, I eat a ton of food, like follow me, but I'm 6'1". I was like 135 pounds, dripping wet. But yet I was like a skinny fat guy. Like I just had a belly. Right. So people would talk to me about weight, or they would talk about being bigger. And I was like, I've got the same mental stuff, like around this idea of being a fat, skinny kid. Like I can't put on weight. I keep trying to put on weight. Just wanted to play basketball when I was like 16, right? Like how can I get bigger and stronger? And so that really got me to my pain point of being really frustrated, while at the same time, man, I sounded like a 70-year-old, 80-year-old man. I mean, maybe a 50 or a 40-year-old man in a lot of pain, but just complain. I was in my early 20s and everything hurt. My shoulders hurt if I slept on them wrong. My hips hurt. I hurt laying down. Like it was wild. Like it just bothered me. So one of my roommates was getting his master's in kinesiology. And I said to him that I was just getting really mad about being underweight and people saying things to me. And he's like, go read the
Were they saying
ingredients.
like derogatory things? Like,
Just like drug things because I was in the bar business, right? Like
oh yeah,
how
okay,
much cocaine are you doing, right? None. I've never done it in my life.
yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
The common chat of the bar. Yeah.
Yeah, like you need to eat something, right?
Mhm.
So, and I could see myself in the mirror, like I was skinny, it
Right,
wasn't,
right. Mhm.
but it was like follow me around, like so I said to my roommate, if they follow me around and watch me eat, like I eat 3,500, 5,000 calories, like I've got no problem consuming calories, but that was why for me the calorie conversation I just struggled with it because not all calories are created equal and how the
Right.
body works and in my experience. So again, not having the health background, it was just one of those conversations that was always very intriguing to me. It was like religion. Like let's get to know your beliefs around these certain things that our
Sure.
textbook tell us are true. And so my roommate was like, go get the box of those granola bars you're eating. Like all you eat is crap. Like you don't eat anything good. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right. So I go get the
Mhm.
box and we're looking through it. And he's like, well, what is that ingredient? What is that ingredient? What is that ingredient? I didn't know what any name it was. But that got me reading ingredients and then Googling them on the internet or leading me to the ewg.org, the Environmental Working Group, and then researching some of the stuff that was there to see what they said about it. And pretty eye-opening, like all of a
Yeah.
sudden these conditions take place and this is a carcinogenic and all the other bad things that you can kind of
Right.
find when
Yeah.
you start reading about those things, right? So then I moved to California and I had some friends. I'd sold the bar and I wanted to get into the debt consolidation business because that's what my best client at the bar, that was the business that he did. And I was like, I can just make this big impact if I just had a bigger source of income money and I
Mhm.
could do these things in the world. And I got my butt kicked and learned I didn't know anything about marketing. And it was a very educational experience. While at the same time, I was just diving into the online space because online was really becoming a bigger thing in terms of what you could Google search for and read about and learn. And I had some friends that were getting into this ozone business. I was like, well, what's this ozone stuff? And it turns out ozone is the world's most powerful sanitizer. It's just 3 molecules of oxygen. But you can clean the air, you can clean the dirt, you can clean water. Like
Mhm.
ozone's amazing, right? Like there's all kinds of medical research that's published going back into like the 50s of stuff that you can do with ozone. But
Mhm.
the medical practice and nobody talks about it. Now it's becoming something you can go get ozone at the dental, you can get ozone injections, you can kind of do blood doping with ozone. They'll take your blood out, inject it with ozone and put it back in you. Super awesome. Way, 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 way euphoric in the amount of blood that all of a sudden oxygen that's like getting to your brain.
Mhm.
I had really damaged my rotator cuff. And so that was what led me to figuring out getting an ozone injection and doing the blood doping. But I went from not lifting 3 pounds, more than 3 pounds above my shoulders
Mhm.
in the gym to lifting 20-pound dumbbells above my shoulders, which just blew my mind because for years I had damaged my rotator cuff. I
Yeah.
just couldn't do anything that was strength above my head. And I got that injection and I did the blood doping version of it too. And the next thing I know, I'm just like lifting crazy amounts of weights above my head as far as I'm concerned, 20 pounds,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, it's a what, a 700% increase right there, you know?
Yeah, and that's when I finally felt like a tweak. So I dropped down to the 15-pound, but I've gone just so far above and beyond that since then, and I've never really looked back,
Yeah.
right? But in the journey, when I was living in California, people were talking about biofeedback and bioresonance.
Mhm.
And I just didn't know what it was, and I didn't know if I believed in it. So I would ask them, it was like the 6 month commitment, sign up for it, you go through all these sessions, but it was a few grand and I just wasn't affordable for me at the time.
Mhm.
So I moved back to Wisconsin and I had met a woman that was talking about essential oils and I was just diving into this world of alternative health. And turns out she had a biofeedback device that she was using at her local practice. And after we connected on Facebook, I figured that out. So I sent her a message. I was like, hey, can we grab some tea? And she was like, yeah, no problem. So I was talking to her about it and she was And I was just telling her my curiosity side of it. And she was like, yeah, I'm curious about it too. She's like, most people I can help incredibly quickly. There's some people I'm getting into a dozen sessions with them and they're just not getting better. And so she said that she had just gotten another biofeedback device that she wanted to use. And it's probably bioresonance. Biofeedback is a trademarked name, and it's one type of thing.
Okay.
But I feel like it's the common term because most people don't realize that it's trademarked.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know it was I didn't know it was trademarks. I hear that all over the place.
Yeah, no, and biofeedback is the big thing, but it's specifically trademark what biofeedback is.
Okay. What is it then?
It's one type of the device.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many energetic devices that now exist. I think of them all as biofeedback.
Sure. Okay.
But I know that there's one that was like specifically trademarked for it. So the rest of them are more bioresonance, or you're supposed to technically call them something different. I think the general population calls them biofeedback devices.
It's like Kleenex. The Kleenex is not a tissue. Kleenex is a brand. It's kind of like a similar thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had gotten pretty good in my habits by this point. Like I'm a few years in, but I don't know if I believe this biofeedback. So like, let's play. So go get my stuff. She's like, wow, you're really healthy. You were one of the best people that I've seen. So for like the next 13 months, I'd go up and down. I'd do terribly unhealthy things for myself. I'd go see it again. Like, what's it going to tell me? And tell me. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. She would say, I'm reading your dirty thoughts. Like I'm telling you, I get to know more about you than you realize. And then there was times on the drive there to go do it, whatever I was thinking about, she would bring it up in the session. I'm like, what? How do you know that? She's like, I'm telling you, this thing tells us all this stuff about you. And the one thing that just kept staying true for me was like stomach acid issues. I had issues with my stomach acid. So I asked her, what can I do to fix my stomach acid? I don't want to keep taking, what is the HCI, hydrochloric acid pills to like improve your digestion. It's like this, I've got to be done with this. And she goes, well, you can keep taking increasing amounts until you flush your mucus lining. And then you can rebuild your digestion from there, which was kind of difficult for me at the time. Like very emotionally, like I'd been in the mindset world now for a while. I'd done the NLP stuff. So I'm very well aware, but yet after this happens for me, and I mean, I was eating a lot of these pills. I was talking to the naturopath and she was like, that's a crazy amount.
Really?
Slow down, start to consume the same amount. Because originally it was like, increase your dose every day. And then I'm like, this is how much I'm eating. And she was like, eat some of those same doses for a few days before you keep going up. But then mentally, I just wasn't prepared for the backlash of how emotional it is when you kind of take your nervous system and you just pull on the rubber band in this other direction. Like it's got to snap back. Right. And I've learned that now from my neuro experience. But at the time, like after it had happened, I couldn't eat anything at first. I had to get myself where I could eat. But as soon as I could eat solid food again, like I was eating a block of cheese. And I knew I shouldn't be eating cheese right now, but I just wanted to eat the cheese so bad. And I was like, I shouldn't be eating this. And then later on, it was, okay, if you do that again, keep the house clean of stuff that you're not supposed to go get into. Right. And I've learned a lot of less stressful ways of how you can go about improving your diet and changing your digestion without having to do something ridiculous like that. And it's not even good for people's nervous systems to do something ridiculous like that, but it was part of my journey, I guess.
Yeah. So hold on, I just want to pause you for a sec with this biofeedback device on there, because you said that they would go in and they would know like what you were thinking like right beforehand from this device of going in. How did that process work? That seems like that's fascinating to get results like that. Like, what's the process like of going in and doing something like that?
You got to talk to a physicist or something that gets into the energy for how those devices works, because there's numerous of them. I mean, I've played with probably 5 different types of devices personally, but I've seen and researched so many more that are on the internet. But in the world of functional medicine, you can spend all of the like hormone testing. What's it going to cost you? $1,000, $1,500, maybe $2,000, depending on if you're going in and you're trying to get everything done. And for a lot of people that have stomach issues, it's just not applicable, right? Like start spending that money on the medicine you're putting into your mouth every day. Right. And as soon as you start making some of those choices and changes, then you can get to the point where money can change and you can save, and then you can start to get the testing. But wherever you are today, if you got really bad digestive issues and you're just got the runs every day and you're going multiple times a day and you just can't figure out your digestion, go get digestive testing.
Right.
Right. Like get your stools analyzed and make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's really good benefits with any testing, whether it's hormone, they can look at you, they can figure stuff out, they can dive right in there. But generally speaking, everybody can work on improving their digestive function. Like
Right.
everybody can start to figure out what that looks like. And it's in our everyday habits of how are we eating every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So once I can figure out what somebody's doing, they tell me what's going on with them. I don't have magic answers. There's no one right way, but there is enough experience to say, hey, why don't you try doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can see how that works out for them. And then based on whatever that experience is, then we can say, hey, how about you try this other thing? Right. But one of the big ways I think people can dial into their health so much faster is by doing a bioresonance. Like go try 1 or 2 biofeedback devices, see what they tell you,
Mm-hmm.
and start changing your lifestyle based on what you learn about yourself from biofeedback.
Mm.
Plus, in most biofeedback, I mean, there's a company that takes your hair and does the analysis, like it's basically bioresonance,
Right.
but they call it just testing. But then some of those offices have the bioresonance device that'll do the energetic healing. So it'll look and see where you're at, and then at the same time, it'll turn around and give you the energy that your body needs to balance you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is most biofeedback devices.
In what way? What kind of energy like is that, do you think?
Who are the people that are doing this research that are getting
Yeah.
into these devices that are creating it? And how do we really know? We don't.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the things about neurofeedback. Dr. Amen gets tons of really amazing research
Mm-hmm.
with helping people do neurofeedback. But who decides the programming for what a normal brain is for neurofeedback?
Right.
So the same thing with the bioenergetic devices. What's the frequency that they're doing and how do they know? Now, Dr. Rife, God bless his heart, put out all of his research when he was helping people, which gave everybody the research to start running and looking at electricity. But there's a doctor in Florida who his typical client has been diagnosed with breast cancer for like the 3rd or 4th time. You got to join this private membership association for him to talk to you so he doesn't lose his licensing and all of those things, right? But the cancer will grow out of these women's breasts because now they're done with the medical system. They want to go back and find out a better way, right? So the cancer will grow out of their breast or out of their chest. It's nasty, open wound, doesn't look good, but it's going through its healing process.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a lizard, they literally regrow their breast. But his way of doing this is through micro frequencies, acupressure points in your ears.
Mm-hmm.
But the frequency that your body needs will change depending on if you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. It'll change if it's the springtime or the wintertime. So now you're getting into the Eastern medicine of the world,
right.
of like, how did they learn these things that they could pass this knowledge down where they didn't have the various bioresonance devices that would use a specific frequency? And again, whenever I go use a bioresonance device, maybe it'll tell me what the frequency is when they're doing it in the healing, like, oh, this liver, it's using this frequency.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I have no idea what frequency the device is using.
Yeah.
It's just telling me that my liver needs this frequency and it's giving me a frequency.
Yeah. This is why I think this stuff is so fascinating, because I've seen it work and I've talked with people like you, like Matt, Bush. I just had Dr. Kathy Dooley on from neurokinetic therapy work. And it's like these things are showing these great results, but it's almost hard to explain why in so many ways. Like the body's so intricate. There's so much detail that's going on. My coach, Brett Jones, always says the body's a crazy place to live. I think it's the greatest quote ever from there. So it's like going into this is why, do you think this is why some people are so confused or maybe don't understand this style of holistic health, because it's hard to fully grasp exactly what's going on, even though it's working? It's like, I think as a human, like we want to know why.
We want to know why, and it's outside of our programming.
Mm-hmm.
Since the moment we grew up, we were taught that our parents had insurance and we go to the doctor and the doctor gives us a physical, and we need a physical to play sports because the school says they have to send us to go do these things.
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it's like, oh, you get sick. Or in my case, it was, do you want to get acne? No, I don't want to get acne. Well,
Mhm.
here you're going to need this pill so that you don't get acne. 1 week
Mm.
after taking these pills that weren't supposed to give me acne, I started getting acne in my life. How does that work? Right?
Up the dosage. Yep. Keep rolling.
Growing up, I knew that I was allergic to penicillin. I knew I did not want to break out in hives like I did when I was little. And I remember that being horrible. Like they thought I had chicken pox.
Mhm.
So, but then as I get older in life, then I look back and I reflect and I learn from my mom that I had a ton of ear infections. So they just kept giving it to me and kept giving it to me. And then you get into the woo world of the medical medium. And
Mhm.
what he says acne is created from is from a specific type of virus. It comes from kids that have strep throat, ear infections. It lives in your liver. So then it's like, how long throughout your life do you kind of keep detoxing from this bacteria? Because your liver's constantly fighting it. It's constantly thriving in whatever environment you keep creating for it,
Mhm.
right? Another interesting aspect of my gut journey, I'd gotten into the point where I was doing a bunch of enemas, like up to 13 in a day. Not even saying it's healthy, just saying I was experimenting with myself, right?
Yeah.
And I was using ozone enemas, MMS enemas, coffee enemas. I did a raw milk enema. Again, experimenting, don't know, don't necessarily recommend it. Just
Right.
was
It's
just was doing it.
not the first step to take. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I just was blown away at all the yeast and candida that kept coming out of my body, which was the motivation for me to continue to do it. Like,
Mhm.
how big am I? Not very. So how much of this stuff can continue to come out of me?
Mhm.
But then realizing how I'm recreating it in my diet, and I did this for 9 months.
Yeah.
So it's a big chunk of block where a lot's coming out. My diet's going up and down
Mhm.
between what I'm feeding it, what I'm not. I'm doing my gut healthy things, right? And then at that Christmas, I'm talking with my cousin. She's like, we were talking about gut health. I said, well, I know my gut health is based on all that milk replacer I ate as a kid. And she goes, you know what that is, don't you? So for the background here, I grew up
Mhm.
on a farm. My uncle sold the milk replacer that you mix with the water to feed the baby calves. And
Okay.
I would just eat the powder, just by the handful. Dad would take me up to go eat dinner. I was full. I'd eaten already plenty of milk replacer down in the barn.
Mhm.
And I was a finicky kid. I could always eat a lot of sugar. Every other kid would get sick. They wouldn't feel good. Not me. I could just keep eating sugar. I wanted more sugar. It was like this addiction to eat more sugar. So this diet world of my experience with sugar and all the things that people tell us about sugar. So then when I get into the neuro world and they're like, sugar is feeding your nervous system. When I
Mhm.
did Dr. Mike T. Nelson's metabolic flexibility, sugar is feeding your muscles. So it just gave me this different lens of how I was looking at sugar as a fuel source and what our
Mm.
cells wanted, right? And so my cousin's like, do you know what that is? And I said, no, I don't. She's like, it's all corn syrup, Joe.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's the base of my gut. From the time I was a little kid, just eating corn syrup, no wonder I could populate candida and I never had problem eating sugar, but yet I didn't have the type 2 diabetic symptoms either. Because I was always wondering, how am I not a type 2 diabetic?
Right. Yeah.
How have I not created type 2 all the health stuff I'd read, I should be a type 2 diabetic.
Mhm.
And it just never made sense to me. Then I start to learn about the stuff that I had been through growing up, compound fracture in a femur, different injuries, and the level of safety that the nervous system needs. And if you're not feeling safe, you're going to consume more sugar. So how often in my life was I consuming sugar because I was inside of a jar where I couldn't read the label that told me about my nervous system?
Mm. Okay. That's
So
it. So
I just
you.
have this way of life where I'm going through and I'm doing certain things, and the world is saying this information about the way that I'm living, but I'm
Mhm.
not experiencing what the world is telling me as I'm living this other life of what I know. But now it makes sense to me when I look back at, this is what I did as a kid.
Right.
These are how
Mhm.
these things have done. As I strengthened my gut, every time I would strengthen my gut, I got better about the after I would do something ridiculous.
Mhm.
And so I can ease my way back into that like rubber band slingshot. So it's going the other way in a really positive direction. But eventually there always comes a time where I eat a bunch of sugar.
Right.
And it tells me now how well I do not feel when I do that. So
Okay.
I know that there's been massive changes in my system for how that works.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. It's like I've seen it with people when you actually make that big change and then you go back to an old habit of what you've done before, you feel the impact of that so much quicker on there. Like realizing what you once thought was normal, like, oh, just eating a bunch of sugar, you felt fine doing it. It's like you don't realize. I always thought of this like after I stopped smoking when I was younger. I used to, when I was in my teens, I smoked cigarettes, all my friends did. You don't realize afterwards how much cigarettes smells. It's like you can smell a cigarette from like 100 yards away when you're a non-smoker, but when you're within it and you're just doing it, you don't think anything of it. It's just part of your daily life. That's so similar in almost every aspect of what we do, specifically with our diet and what we're putting and ingesting, into our body. We might think that we feel normal, but it's just because we haven't felt actually what could be optimal for us if we just make these changes.
I
So,
mean, to your point about smoking, the bar,
mhm,
we in Wisconsin at the time, you could smoke. So didn't really notice the smoke. Growing up as a kid, if somebody was smoking in McDonald's, because you used to be able to smoke in McDonald's back in the day,
mhm.
I was the kid on the other end of McDonald's coughing and being really obnoxious and being, Mom, they're smoking over there. They won't put it out. Right. So I was really triggered by the cigarette smoke from my allergies.
Mhm.
And so I never noticed it in the bar. But if I got home and tried to go to bed without showering,
Yeah,
no way.
yeah, that's
That
funny.
stunk so
Yeah.
bad.
So on your gut journey of fixing this and doing this work after you've found out this information, what were the big things that you did to change your diet over that effectively impact your health, and how long did it really take for you to really see the impact of that?
That's a great question. So in my journey, along the course of many years, I run into the mucusless diet. And the mucusless diet was written by Dr. Earhart, and he died in 1921. Probably the first person killed by Big Pharma, potentially. In the book, they talk about his story of doctors from all over the country coming to LA to listen to him speak. And when you read his book and he talks about Big Pharma, I thought it was 1950s. I didn't even realize that Big Pharma existed like that, the way he described it in 1921.
Mm,
So he's fire department shows up, no more people can come in, can't listen to him. I didn't even realize the fire department code thing was a big deal, but
mhm.
back then it probably was from big city fires and whatever.
Sure.
I just never really thought about it until I'm reading the book and I'm like, fire code? How many doctors were they trying to keep out of the room? Is the way my conspiracy brain was
100.
thinking,
Yep. Mhm.
right?
That's exactly where my brain went too. So,
So he leaves and his new shoes, he slips on the curb and hits his head and he died. I'm pretty sure he had his head clonked against the curb and then he died. Like,
right. Yeah.
who slips with new shoes and then falls straight down to hit their head perfectly to kill themselves?
Wow.
Anyway, he was diagnosed with Bright's disease when he was living in Germany, and he traveled to the Middle East and Northern Africa, and then he went back to Germany, and no one recognized him. He now looked like a Middle Eastern man, dark complected, no longer the white German man. And he says that whiteness is a sickness, that we want to be mucusless. And he said in 1921, prior to all the modern toxins that are sprayed in our skies and put in our foods and the plastics that we now use today, so way before all of that stuff existed, he said it would take a minimum of 3 years for a healthy person to become mucusless.
Mm.
So
When he's saying mucus, like what is he talking about with mucus? I think we know the word, but what are we talking about in regards to like food and kind of like going into your gut?
So when we're creating the mucus, to a degree, the mucus is a level of barrier. Like a lot of people will talk about how the mucus protects our skin and our stomach from bugs or whatever
Okay.
else that's coming in there. There's this mucus layer that's
Yep.
protecting
Mhm.
us. It's also being created by inflammation.
Okay. Mhm.
So if you can remove all of the inflammation, then are you really adding in something else that needs to create the mucus?
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever watched the YouTube videos where the people who do a lot of enemas and different gut stuff, and then they get the big black thing that comes out of their colon that's all based on the mucus that they replenished in their guts.
I personally haven't, just because I have a pretty strong stomach on there, but that type of stuff is really challenging for me to roll into. I'm taking your 100% word for it.
I'm promising you every time I catch myself in that video, I'm clicking away. Because it's like, wait a second, how did that come out? But
Yeah.
I've read enough where people describe it versus
Mhm.
me having to watch it.
Yep.
And I've never done the try to collect those things. It's just not for me. If
Mhm.
I can just keep feeling better, cool. I don't need to collect it and look at it.
Mhm.
So some people do.
Yeah. Mhm.
Uh, that's the mucus, though. If the mucus is building up in our intestines to protect us, and then what's good may or may not even be getting through the mucus layer. So I compound fractured my femur. Everyone tells me how lucky I am to be alive because I needed 3 pints of blood because I broke the place where all of our blood is created.
Mhm.
Now, I believe all of our blood is created in our femur and in our bones for many years after this point. And then I come across Dr. Robert Young, who wrote the book, The pH Miracle of Living. And in his book, he says that healthy blood is not made in the bones, it's made in the small intestines. If you're making blood in your bones, you're acidifying, you're aging, and you're dying. Like what?
Mhm.
What do you mean? Well, it's basically our body wants to maintain that certain pH balance, which is mostly done through our breath work. So I don't necessarily even go off into the weeds of the alkaline diet.
Mhm.
They just eat really clean foods,
Sure.
right? Like
Yep. Mhm.
eat real food, eat clean foods,
Mhm.
and breathe well,
Got it. Mhm.
right? Micronutrients, but it's that mucus layer in our small intestines. Because then fast forward a few more years and I'm doing the gut stuff and I'm learning from an Ayurvedic doctor, Dr. John Dillard. And he says that the energy of our foods goes from our lymphatic system to our blood, to our muscles, and so on.
Mhm.
But it was when he said that it goes from the lymph to the blood that then I had to start thinking about all this lymphatic stuff that I'd been learning about, going back to this area that Dr. Young talked about, healthy blood being made in the small intestines. And
Mhm.
if the lymphatic system surrounds all of our skin, both internally and externally, then on the other side of the small intestines is lymph. And it's the largest area of lymph in our body is in our gut.
Mhm.
And the lymphatic system is both the body's drains, taking the toxins out of it, but it's also delivering the nutrients to our blood.
Mhm.
So the mucus layer, depending on where everyone's at in their gut health and in their journey, you just get, there's things that you got to do to break that down, to replenish it and go back. You don't have to do extreme. You don't have to
Mhm.
look for it to all come out in one big heaping thing like some people do on YouTube,
Sure. Mhm.
right? But how do you start to change the medicine you put in your mouth with 2 or 3 meals a day,
Mhm.
right? How do you start to just do something for 3 days in a fast for 3 days?
Mhm.
Women can start hitting stem cell reproduction after 2 days. Men got to go a full three. But now when we're fasting, we're completely allowing those organs to rest.
Mhm.
We're allowing those organs to heal that are our digestion that we're used to putting stuff in constantly.
Yeah.
But it's the monkeys that ate less that live longer than the monkeys
Mhm.
that consume more in the study done at University of Wisconsin,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
that's true. I think it is studied that even in human mortality, like the people who live the longest, there's calorie restriction is one of the ways that you actually go into living longer. So you're just eating in not a full deprived based state, but just slightly under maintenance on there is actually, huge for increasing lifespan.
So doing Dr. Mike's metabolic flexibility, one of
Mhm.
my biggest takeaways was, holy cow, I've managed to stay skinny my life and be in this healthy sort of
Mhm.
state just based on habits that were natural to me. Like if I ate a bunch of crap, I just wasn't hungry for a really long time.
Mhm.
I wasn't intermittent fasting. I just wasn't hungry.
Right.
It wasn't a diet. I wasn't hungry.
Yeah. It's funny, I think, fasting is an interesting topic that I've seen because I see a lot of people who swear by it in many ways because they're trying to lose weight. And I think it is a very good, way to restrict your calories throughout the day. I think a lot of the benefits that people get in a weight loss aspect from fasting is probably more so because they're reducing their calories. If you're eating in less throughout the day, you're probably consuming less calories. But the health benefits of fasting, as you're talking about with ultimate gut health, I know, like, I think the easy way to think of gut health, I always think of the stomach. It's like everything just flows through the stomach, not even really thinking much about the intestines and what's going on there. And when you explain that about, of the lymphs going from the intestine, and that's essentially where blood's supposed to be made from there. So I assume if that is, you kind of put a barrier up there on the first entry on the road to being optimal, if then naturally the body has to compensate from somewhere, that's maybe when it's starting to create blood in the bones, and that's when it's not really its primary source to do. That's why you probably decay a bit faster. Is that fair?
I think it's more cellular communication
Okay.
and the pH side of it to a degree, I guess. You need certain minerals.
Mhm.
So to me, the blood that's being created in our bones is because we're needing calcium because we don't have the right amount of magnesium.
Mhm.
Everything that I've read and kind of learned about, I mean, there's so many doctors that have different magnesium cure-alls for all kinds of reasons, right? I don't. So, but my biggest takeaway is that our skin cells, our tissue cells, need magnesium to make healthy cells.
Mhm.
And if they don't have magnesium to make healthy cells, then the body starts to use the calcium.
Mm.
So if we
Okay.
have the right amount of magnesium in our tissue cells, then we keep our calcium in our bones. And it's an interesting ratio, and it's kind of similar to the ratio for the potassium. We always talk about sodium's bad, but in the sodium pump,
Mhm.
the the nutrient that's working in conjunction with the sodium is potassium. And the
Mhm.
same is true. We always talk about calcium. Oh, vitamin D and calcium, vitamin D and calcium. Look at the research for magnesium and vitamin D.
Right.
Right? If you can improve your magnesium ratios where you're getting 3 times more magnesium than vitamin D than calcium, watch your life start to change.
Yeah. No, I've seen that, and I've studied some of that as well. So I think you're right on
And
the
then if
money.
you look at
Mhm.
supplementation,
Mhm.
the calcium supplements are 3-to-1 ratio calcium to magnesium.
Are they really?
It's a dirty industry. Money's got to be made.
No doubt, no doubt. So is the mucusless diet, would that be I mean, would that be essentially like an anti-inflammatory, diet? Is that kind of similar way?
He's eating with the seasons. He's
Okay.
eating whole foods. He's eating real foods.
Mhm.
He's changing the food up. Far
Mhm.
too many people find that this food makes me feel good, and then they eat those same things every day.
Mhm.
It's not how we were designed. It's not the nature we grew up in.
Mhm.
There's springtime when certain things aren't available. In the wintertime, we can harvest and collect and gather and hold on to things for a really long time to make it through winter.
Yeah. It's funny, it's because I'm going through that right now myself, with some gut work. I'm working with our friend, Kevin Kerfman on that because I've been one of those, I'm incredibly regimented with nutrition. I eat very similar things every single day, and I've been doing that for a long time. And when I switched over to that, probably about 4 years ago, it worked like immediately. Like joints felt great, like I was as lean as I could. My energy was through the roof, strength went through the roof. But continuously going through that, it developed probably a little bit of a micronutrient deficiency from there. My gut changed, from there. So as you talk about eating, through the seasons and changing a little bit of the variety on that, it's not essential as much for like body composition. I mean, that's a whole nother topic of going in there, but the micronutrient aspect of how you feel and how your body is really processing as one full system, I think is so powerful. And I think this is where a lot of people they get stuck in a diet zealot type mindset where they do one thing and it works, like they're feeling really good at the time and they maybe drop 20 pounds and their energy goes up and they're feeling stronger. So it's this natural thing of like, oh, I found my way, this is what I need to do now. So then they just continuously do it till eventually that stops to work, either with the changes they're trying to make, or they just don't feel the same way, the energy's not working. So that's kind of what you're talking about here, is like, yeah, everything works for a particular time frame, but eventually then you have to adjust. And the way to do this is you just have to monitor this. And probably the bioresilience is really the best way to do this.
Mhm. I love that you brought up curve. because I was thinking earlier about the two of us doing the digestive dysfunction program. And in the program, how we teach, she's going through the entire, from the mouth and the nasal, like breathing, smelling the food, like telling your brain what's coming, chewing your food so that your brain, all the cells in your mouth are telling your brain what's coming, so your stomach can start to do what it's going to do. You mentioned the stomach before as gut health as being the stomach. Well, is it the top of the stomach? Is it the back of the stomach?
Right.
Is it the small intestines? Is it the large intestines? Is it your pancreas? Is it your gallbladder? You got stuff going on with your liver. I mean, the whole track from start to finish, there's a lot going on there. And everybody is an individual human that's in a different place, that's been consuming different foods. You know yourself, the listener listening, they know themselves. They know what they've been eating or what they haven't been eating, and they know what their energy levels are. So are they willing to start changing those things and experimenting to see what they're at? I don't know. But if they do, they'll find they feel better certain ways than if they do other things. I just got really anal into cellular health and cellular health. Like, how do you take what Dr. Earhart somehow knew and then take what we have in our modern world for modern science and give this innate intelligence back into our body? Like, how do we activate that innate intelligence on a cellular level so that the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell just communicate with ease? Right? Cellular detox people, Dr. Pompeo, he's really popular in helping health professionals figure out their cellular health. And outside of the cell membrane is from fat. So how many bad fats exist in the American diet and culture? Well, now all of a sudden you've got a lot of cells that aren't going to be communicating very well because your body's using this fat in those ways.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? You know, the big thing that I always talk about, the gut health side of it, is you mess up your stomach acid, you mess up your bile. You mess up your bile, you mess up your stomach acid. So you've got to fix both. Now, maybe you're so far in one direction that you got to start over in one area before you start in the other. But you have to deal with both.
Eventually, I have to meet in the middle.
Right? You have to meet in the middle. You got to deal with both. So one of my favorite things is coconut oil for the listeners, right? Using coconut oil on your skin, loaded with magnesium, loaded with potassium, healthy fat. Now, a lot of people will say, I can't use coconut oil. I break out. That's because your body's inflamed and the coconut oil is medicine and it's giving you an allergic reaction that you're saying this isn't good for me. Just use smaller doses.
Yeah.
Maybe take it internally. Maybe find another way to increase some of these other areas. And maybe you need to start by taking ghee internally to get your bile moving so that your body starts getting the toxins out of you. Right? The stomach acid needs to break everything down, but without bile flow, our toxins just turn.
Right.
They spin in the body over and over and over again. And even the big C word, it's not that big of a deal. It's abnormal cell growth. It's just abnormal cell growth. You don't want the big C? Create healthy cells.
Yeah. I think it's an important thing that you just said there too about, I think we find something and then we start applying it and we want to see an immediate result. And if anything is shifted from like optimal feeling on it, like you break out right away, you immediately say that this is not for me. It might actually be the right thing. Like I see this in health and fitness all the time, you know, with certain things. It's like, yeah, like one exercise that you do, it might make you feel really sore, or it might not be so conducive with your body right now. Well, you're coming from an unhealthy place at the moment. It's like, it's probably, and then you meet it with something that's good for you. There's going to be some friction involved. The body's going to probably try and fight back from where it is at the moment. It doesn't mean you need to throw it out and say, oh, this isn't for me. You probably maybe just need to, you know, explore the remedy a little bit more, change the dosage a little bit and work. Because these things are proven. I've heard of this with coconut oil over and over again.
I mean, the books that you can read that tell you about the miracles that have happened from coconut oil are just mind-blowing. There's so many different things in them, right? When I started to get a master's in natural health, and then I saw all of the modern science, and I just wasn't interested in the books the curriculum was telling me I needed to read, so I was going to go read what I wanted to. And it was lost my train of thought. Where was I
Mhm.
going with that? It's just interesting what we now know versus the mucusless time, right?
Mhm.
Back to 1921 versus what we know now. So if we start to take some of those principles that he talked about from stress and inflammation and whether it's neuro that's reducing
Mhm.
stress or it's changing how we're eating because we realize that we're in a emotional cyclical pattern that we feel safe, so we keep doing the foods that we're doing because the foods perpetuate the emotional cycle.
Mhm.
And you lose safety if you change the foods,
Mhm.
right? So there's this whole homeostasis balance area that's taking place within the body between your mindset, because your foods are telling your hormones what to create and how to be created,
Mhm.
and then your relationship patterns that are going back and forth through these things with people.
Mhm.
It- the mucusless side of it, where the individual side of it, like what have you been eating? How is your nervous system trained for every day of your life?
Mhm.
And then how have you seen yourself? What do you think about regularly?
Yeah.
Like what concerns you or what excites you? Do you
Mhm.
think more about what concerns you? Or do you think more about what's exciting to you?
Right.
Right? All those things are just these different layers that make us all so beautiful.
Yeah. I want to segue that a bit into the neuro side as well, because I know this, I can go for gut health forever, and I know they're so connected together in this. But in the work then that you do with neuro training, is there a lot of connection between like neuro training and then gut health? Have you seen that?
So compound fractured my femur.
Mhm.
I'm going through the neuro training. The Q1 training, we're looking at the biomechanical walk and gait. I just keep walking. I'm doing neuro drills. I'm doing the assess and reassess. I'm getting positive assessments. I got 5 people trying to get my gait to change biomechanically.
Mhm.
Keep doing drills, nothing's working. I finally pull up my shorts and I'm like, do you think it has anything to do with my compound fractured femur? And they went, yeah. Gave me a little sensory information and said, walk. Immediately, all 5 people went, that's the change they'd been trying to get.
Mhm.
So you can do neuro drills that are good for your body, but they don't give your nervous system a shift. But the neuro is so cool because you can immediately impact your body to get a shift.
Right.
Now, how do you start to train that
Mhm.
safety so that your body's not stuck in this place where for me, I was swerving in one direction, I was looking a certain way, I got compound fractured femur, my body just held all of those memories. So as I'm getting my neuro mentorship education, I have this lens of all of the benefits that I've improved since making these changes to my gut, since doing more movement things like, oh, I had this success and I was doing this aspect of it. The connections of how yoga helped me, the connections of what my diet was doing for me or not for me, right? Like when I took all the HCI pills and flushed my mucus lining in my stomach, I saw a nervous system response.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't have really thought of that from a nervous system response at all. I thought of it as a mindset response. I
Right.
wasn't prepared to emotionally handle that, right?
Mhm.
The vagus nerve system is so popular. Everybody talks about you got to do the
Yeah.
vagus nerve things, the vagus nerve. Well, that's all gathered around our gut. How many
Mhm.
people can change their diet 1,000 different ways, but they never calm their nervous system for rest and digest to happen?
Mhm.
You might think it's breathing drills. You might think it's the vagus stuff. Could be something upstream. It could be your vestibular system, your
Right.
balance system. It could be your vision system that's creating the threat. So if
Mhm.
you can reduce the threat in your higher order systems, your vision or your balance and vestibular systems, then how much better do you start to digest where you never thought about it that way before? Ever. You just kept going to people trying to get them to give you the magic supplement or make this other thing that happened. For me, I just kept trying to figure out how can I stop overthinking? How can I stop feeling overwhelmed? Well, when I finally started finding the neuro drills that got me those bigger, deeper shifts,
Mhm.
now it's just the integration. How do I catch myself and have the awareness for those moments to then integrate it? How can I not be so hard on myself to think that my mindset should have just picked that up immediately and realize there's just a little beauty in the journey?
So is that essentially like if you're going to break down the benefits of neuro training, this is where I think I've like it gets a little complicated because neuro is such a big word, right? There's so much that goes into that word. But what you said right there of reducing the threat from there, I think that's really powerful. So it's essentially when we talk about like the benefits of doing neuro training and getting into this, is the essential part is it's reducing your body's threat detection system so it allows the biomechanics and the other stuff to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I know you've heard Matt Bush say this, and I have had to listen to Matt Bush say this so many times for it to actually stick. Everything we do all day long creates an input. That input is training your nervous system. Is it a threatening input that your body is saying, ooh, I'm shrinking, I'm scared, I'm afraid?
Mhm.
Or is it an input that your body's curious about? Oh, I kind of like that. Does your neuroplasticity want to grow? Or is your neuroplasticity shrinking? So are
Mm.
you growth oriented or are you kind of stuck in trauma bonds?
Right. Right.
Right. And I mean, the how we move, everything that we're doing movement wise, mobility wise, I mean, the movement, people that listen to your podcast, they know this stuff so well. A lot of times when you're talking with the personal trainers about neuro, it just goes over their head because they've learned so much about mobility and the connections and the brain stuff.
Right.
And it's all right there. But it's the deeper patterns that the mentorship really teaches you about the movement that makes the connections from how someone moves and what their experience is in their history
Mhm.
to their balance system, their vestibular, and their vision. Because those are the higher order systems. They're connected right by the brain. Our ears, there's two of them on each side of our brain. There's two
Mhm.
eyes that are directly right going into the brain, right? So, smell is part of that, right? It's just
Right. Yeah.
straight to the brain. Um, so once you can start to intentionally train your system for safety, and you
Mhm.
start to find where your history has had a level of threat where your body is stuck. That's why Matt and Kathy took this to personal trainers
Mhm.
because they're dealing with people every day anyway, and people's training, their nervous system is getting trained constantly.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. That's a great line. I remember Matt saying that of everything is input. And essentially what our brain is meant to do is to see everything that we're taking in at one time and determine, is this good or is this bad? I hate doing it binary like that, but essentially, is this a threat to my system and I need to contract and constrict, or is this safe and I can be open and I can be free? And I used to see this all the time when I managed a club, a fitness club. I've talked about this before, but you'd see people walk in and you could tell that they're scared shitless of the gym just by how they walk in. Like it's this like shuffle in. It's like kind of like they're ready to just turn around, tuck tail, and just head back out the door. You can see it. And then I would look at people after they'd been in for a couple months and they start to feel more comfortable in the environment, their walk would change as they would go in. And my office was right in front of where everybody swiped in, and you could visibly see the change in somebody when they came in. And you can call it anything. You can call it a shift in perspective, and there's a mindset side of it. But I think there's a physiological and a neurological thing that's going on here, as you described there. All of a sudden now, this is not a threatening space. This is now an open space that you can explore.
I love that you said you noticed it in their walk
Mhm.
because that's what neurotrainers are looking for. The shift happens on a subconscious level where people walk better. Their
Mhm.
movement is smoother, and it's not it's biomechanically happening. It's what you're witnessing, but it's at the neurological level of safety that allows the shift to be immediate.
Mhm.
It was when we were learning from Matt and the neurology of coaching, and we were going through that level of it. And I had done so much research and stuff with Dr. Amen, going through his programs of learning how the brain works. When I said to Matt, asked him a question about Dr. Amen, and it was like, well, what about this aspect of the SPEC scans? And Matt said, well, do you want to go have get an injection and get a scan and have them look at a snapshot of what your brain looks like? Or do you want to watch somebody walk, give them an input, and then have them walk again and see if you get a shift in their body.
Mm.
And I immediately was like, that sounds way cooler.
Yeah.
Like I mean, the SPECT scan imaging for long-term purposes and seeing where something like way cool, right? Like super cool image that you can look at your brain, and we're dealing with toxins all the time, all around us. So our body is an incredible filtration system. Just go get it looked at, right? But from the simple perspective of working with someone to get a change immediately in that moment without having to get a scan done, and you can just see the scan as their walk.
Yeah. That's what I thought was so cool when I talked with Matt when he was telling me about that. That's the thing that stuck with me so much, is he said, when you in neuro training, it's immediate. You see an immediate response from it. And there's so little things that we do that we see an immediate response from something. I came from, an FMS background with functional movement, and you can see a shift and stuff, but it's not always a biomechanical issue that's going on. So when he said that, I thought that was huge. I'm like, yeah, that absolutely makes sense when you're changing your nervous system. But my question on that was, you see immediate shift, but I'm sure that it doesn't stick afterwards from there. Like, is there a sticking point in there, or do you need to find the right recipe of your own neuro drills and then just continuously do that? And that's now kind of your recipe for success.
It's similar to the mindset world that we're an onion and we got to peel the layers.
Sure.
Your history of your training has impacted your neurotags in the different systems for your level of safety. So there's a time where you could just crack a code and the nervous system just released it all, and you have this remarkable, magical shift.
It's the transformation. Yeah.
It's just not very often that happens.
Sure.
You're much more likely to start doing some neuro drills. You peeled one back and layer. For a while, I always had to bite on my right side. Now I got to bite on both sides. Most people are bite on one side or the other side. So all of a sudden now I'm biting on both sides. You know, these inputs that we're training ourselves with as neuro drills in the neuro world, like, they only last for so long, and then your body will start to feel safe there for whatever reason, whatever part of the onion came undone. We don't have to know. We just have to recognize that our label shifted, so we want to find another way to keep feeling safer so that our cells can continue to improve their communication level. And we're practicing every day. Whatever we're doing is the neurology of how we're moving. It's what we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
A really great thing that I love to share, thinking about our modern world, and we're sitting on computer screens and we're looking, but it's how often do you sit where something's right in front of you, so your eyes don't feel very safe because something's right in front of you. And then if you're having to make micro saccade movements and your eyes are glancing back and forth all over the place, so you're playing a video game.
Yeah.
Say, right? Like, there's all kinds of things that are happening, or commercials and flashing stuff on the TV, or our cell phones and we're scrolling, flashing, right? Well, you and I had discussed previously the Blue Age group, how they can stand and they can overlook an ocean and do everything else. So immediately with your higher order system, you can palm your eyes and you can look in darkness, and it's going to relax 90% of people's bodies.
Yep.
Some people might feel threat because their eyes got covered, but it might have to do more around the environment that they're in when they chose to cover their eyes, right? And then, but just being able to see as far as you can with nothing that can possibly be dangerous.
Yeah.
So if you're looking off a mountain and you're overlooking things, as long as you're not standing on the edge, right, you're safe and your vision system can relax. Or, as we discussed, looking out over the ocean.
Yeah.
Looking out over a huge lake where you just can't see the other side of Lake Michigan. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's funny. So as you're saying that too, I just checked. I'm like, am I biting on one side of my mouth versus another? And listeners, I know all of you did the exact same thing from here. I thought that was hilarious. So it's all these little subtle shifts and differences that we have in our body. Like, you can think of something like with the bite, just one side versus another. And you might not think of that as something that's like vital or important, because maybe it's not directly threatening your everyday life. You're still going to get your stuff done throughout the day. But if you start adding these things up over and over again, just like you were talking about with building a mucus layer going on in your intestines, or shifting your gait in one side or another, like compensations, the catastrophic stuff happens over time, from this. But so if there's ways that you can just shift it to get at least some sort of positive feedback instantly from there, just so you see another side of the light, that you can actually make that shift. I think that's the best thing as coaches that we can do, is just provide an option of, no, you can feel a different way, because that brings hope, that brings excitement and energy. And if we're going to make a shift in people's lives in really a better way, the first thing you need to do is to give them the best things to get some right feedback for them.
Yeah. I mean, the applied neurology is really the science of hope.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start to see a type 2 diabetic slowly started losing feeling in his legs. Mm-hmm. And he got to the point where he couldn't feel anything below his knees. Mm-hmm. One vision drill, and he immediately could feel everything but his toes in his one foot.
Yeah.
That was an 8-year change that this guy had been slowly experiencing. And a simple vision drill just brought back all of that feeling. Like, that's wild. I mean, those are like the really, really cool stories of it.
Yeah.
To just kind of add to the bite thing, for the listeners, it's one of the cranial nerves. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing the biting on one side or the other side or both sides, you're activating a cranial nerve to just improve the communication that's happening in the brain.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Joe, dude, you're the freaking best. I love you so much, man. Seriously. I'm so happy there are people like you that are doing work like this, because like, it's such depth of knowledge and such intricate details of stuff that I think is so important for the health, like the culture that we have here. Like, I think there's so much information out there, and so much of it is just fed into masking issues over and over again, instead of actually getting to the root cause of how we can really feel the best. And I think the work that you're doing on the neuro side, as well as all the stuff with gut health and mindset, I think is awesome. So thank you so much for coming on today, man. I appreciate it.
Likewise, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If people want to check out more of the work that you're doing, all this stuff, what's the best place that we can direct them?
Facebook is the best place to connect with me, for sure.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, brother, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. You'll also get exclusive access to the Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait. Go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.